Hey everybody, it's Angela Humphries with North Carolina School Choice. I'm here to try to keep you updated on school choice issues in the state of North Carolina. Today I have the lovely Rebecca Deese with us today, and she has a special story to tell. Feel free to ask questions and share this story across your Facebook or Twitter feeds or text to other friends so her story could be shared more widely. We're going to talk about education today and a couple of bills that were introduced in the General Assembly recently. So Rebecca, hi, will you introduce
Hi.
yourself to everybody?
Yes. Thanks for having me, by the way. It's so nice to be able to come on here and share our story, my family's story. I started about a year ago really getting involved in school choice issues. Like a lot of families, you don't really think about it until you have a child that, becomes school age, and then it's kind of important. So I started with school choice advocacy and running my Ask Me in the Bowl Twitter. And it kind of brought me to you where we're here today so we can talk about these issues and about our family issues as well.
Yay, we need more people like you. I said that yesterday. I think I said it last week when I first spoke to you on the phone, right? Hopefully I did. I need to keep repeating that. We
Yes,
need
and
more
there's
people
so
like you.
many families just like mine that are struggling right now to figure out what to do and where to send their child to school.
Yeah, so people being brave enough to tell their stories, share them. I mean, you can, keep some things to yourself if you ever need to, but kind of sharing the basics and how these scholarships and bills might impact your life. If you have no idea what bills we're talking about and you're listening right now, we're following the bills that are coming out of the General Assembly. So that's where the lawmakers in North Carolina are churning out legislation that does affect our day-to-day lives. So you, Rebecca, you'd be affected by something that came out recently. May 18th, there was House Bill 1129, which sounds great in name, right? The bill short title is Ensure a Sound Basic Education. And we don't have to dig into that bill fully right now. We could dig into it a little bit later, but that bill basically caught your eye big time. And I see that you've been more and more vocal since we spoke
Yes.
last week. So that's wonderful. But let's backtrack a little bit and really dig into your story and how bills like these might affect your life and your child's life. And it's great that you got involved, but what do you do now? So how is all this stuff impacting you? So please share your story with us where you're
Okay.
comfortable. You can gloss over some things if you want.
Sure. It's kind of easy just to start from the beginning. My son's now 8 years old. When he was younger, he was very precocious. He was hyperlexic, which means he basically taught himself to read. Um, and then as he got a little bit older, getting towards like kindergarten age, we realized that he knows everything he's supposed to know already for kindergarten, and that he just kept soaring and soaring through curriculum. So that's really when we kind of started our homeschooling journey. And if anyone has followed me on Facebook, you've seen plenty of our science experiment videos and him talking about volcanoes. So when it kind of came to first grade, was when we really started to notice the social differences in our son. And we thought, well, maybe it's just, that he's a little bit gifted, and, all gifted people are quirky, right? So what we did is we went and we had him evaluated to see if that was really the issue or if there was some underlying concerns. And turns out that he has autism, but he's also what they consider twice exceptional. So it's someone who is academically gifted, but may also have neurological differences like autism or ADHD, and they also can have learning disabilities. So with him, he was also diagnosed at that time with dysgraphia, which is a written expression disorder. So he has trouble with his handwriting. He has trouble with getting his thoughts to paper when writing a story. So these are all things that kind of make him, a puzzle piece of a student trying to figure out where to place him at. So when we started looking at our local school district, we went in for what district calls an IEP meeting. So that's when they do their own evaluations and they decide whether he qualifies for any services. So after that, they kind of brushed aside a lot of his exceptionalities because he was so academically advanced. They were like, well, if he's meeting grade level, then there's really not anything that we can do for him. And at that time, he would have been going into second grade. And we were like, well, he's really finishing third grade at home. So is there any way that you can move him up? Like, we understand he's got exceptionalities that, he needs to use a computer for writing, and that he may be a little bit socially and emotionally immature because of his autism, his social differences. And they're like, well, we're not going to move him up because we don't do that unless there's a really great need. So he'll go into second grade with all the other kids the same age, and we can maybe give him an extra worksheet or two to keep him busy while the other kids finish their work. And as a mom, that just screams to me like, there's no way. There's no way he can sit here and finish a grade that he's already finished. He's already surpassed, and try to take in all the sensory overload of a classroom, because he has sensory sensitivities to lights, to sounds, lots of people. I try to explain it like, imagine going into Costco or to an IKEA and sitting down in the middle of an aisle and doing your work. And that's what it's like for him, to have all of these distractions all the time. And so they told us, their words, to basically keep homeschooling him because there was nothing that they could do for him there. So after that, I came home and cried a little bit because,
Yeah, really.
What do you do when your child can't go to school? And I can't go back to work. I can't help, my husband out financially because I have to stay home with my child. Like, we don't have an option. So that we kind of started looking around at private schools in the area, and there was a new one that was being built specifically for children on the autism spectrum. And they boasted, Orton Gillingham curriculum, which, if anyone's familiar with that, it's like the gold standard for children with learning differences.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, they do social skills classes and alternative seating, so he doesn't have to sit still. And it was a dream come true, right? Then you see the price tag of what these schools cost. And it's the average, it's not above average for North Carolina. It's the same price as all the other schools in North Carolina. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll figure this out, right? That's what any good parent says. We'll figure it out. So then I started researching scholarships and grants, and I came across the North Carolina Disability Grant and the Education Savings Account programs. There's 3 that include the Opportunity Scholarship as well, but we were just above the line for the income requirements for the Opportunity Scholarship. However, with the Disability Grant and the ESA, you can qualify if you have an IEP. So thankfully, we ended up getting the IEP from the public school, even though they still didn't recognize his autism on his IEP. What they did was put it under other health impairment, which basically is a category where if he doesn't really qualify under anything else, but they know that he probably could use some extra help, that's what they put that under, other health impairment. So we started looking into those programs, and we applied for everything, got it in on the deadline, got denied for both of them. One is around $8,000, and the other, I believe, is around $9,000. The ESA is $9,000, and you can use this for tuition or adaptive equipment like computers, which is something that my son would need to be able to express his writing. You can use it for tutors and certain therapies that are approved, and it just seemed like the perfect fit, right? North Carolina has these programs. It's perfect. But then we got denied, and I started, in my resentment a little bit, looking into the data of, well, how many are actually awarded? Like, how is this program funded? How many students get it? Because I didn't know anybody who had actually received one. And so I kind of started poking around on the internet to see, well, where are the people that are receiving these grants? Like, who are these families? And like, why didn't we get one? And that's when I kind of saw the numbers that there are so many people that apply for these 2 other scholarship programs, that there's just not enough funding. And that's what they tell you when they write you the letter that you didn't get the grant. They're like, we apologize, but there just wasn't enough funding for all the available applicants that we had. And
That's
so that
interesting. Wait, that's super interesting right there. So so I see a new viewer. So if you're tuning in right now, she's talking about K through 12 scholarships that will help pay for private education. So you applied for two out of the three or you applied for all three
we
scholarships.
applied for all three. We got denied for the opportunity
Mhm.
scholarship based on the income requirements. Even as a
Right
single
away.
income family, right away, we
Okay.
were disqualified. And then we were denied for the disability and the ESA. And what it said in the denial letter, the rejection letter, is that we apologize, but there were too many applicants for the amount of funding.
That's
And
crazy. So that's a
if
story I never hear. First of all,
yes,
the fact that, a parent who is well versed in these programs exists is wonderful. Someone willing to share their story is wonderful. But then hearing, okay, someone said there's no funding and we got denied. And we're still on the hook to either decide to homeschool, like the government school recommended. We don't know what to do with him, right? Was that what they said? We
that's
don't.
exactly what they said verbatim, is we just don't know what to do with him.
And then your choices are homeschool per the government school recommendation, or seek out a private school that is ready to take on specialty cases and accommodate these needs that you mentioned. You mentioned the tools and the computers and things like
Yes.
transferring the writing. Can you explain that again? I need to be able to illuminate that better. Teach
So
me.
what their main focus is to use, or in Gillingham curriculum, which
Yes.
is what they consider a multimodality or hands-on curriculum. They allow small class sizes, so no class has more than 6 students at a time. They have multiple seating areas for the children, so you have like your wiggle seats, or if a child wants to sit on the floor and do their work, they can. It's never an issue of where they're at in the classroom as long as they're engaged, which usually for children like my son on the autism spectrum, they listen even though you don't think that they're listening. If they're not looking at you, they're still actively hearing what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so for students like that, they need that space to feel safe to be able to access their curriculum. And that's exactly what these kind of schools allow them to feel, is safe, which they don't always feel in a normal district classroom. Because of all the sensory sensitivities, it sends them into fight or flight mode all the time. And when you're in constant fight or flight, you can't access your curriculum because you're basically just trying to survive.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense. Your comparison to sitting on the floor in the middle of a Costco aisle trying to do, work
yes,
is a great visual tool for the viewers to just kind of absorb. Trying to put yourself in that situation and function in a school setting would be impossible for me. And I was a disruptor, I guess, during class, probably because I was bored out of my mind. And I didn't, when school was available, I didn't want to be in school. I didn't want to sit in a chair all day. So I could definitely understand distractions. I was one who made them, unfortunately.
and that it happens a lot, especially with your academically gifted or your alternative learners, your auditory learners that need to be moving so their ears can focus on what they're doing. There's so many different styles of learning, and these specialty schools, they adapt for that. They allow the children to learn, how best they learn. And it's unfortunate that they're just few and far between, and they're expensive, especially for, low to middle income families like myself.
So have you ever been approved for any of these
We
grants?
have not. We applied again this year, and again, we got our denial letters for the second time that there was not enough funding for the available applicants.
Do you
And
know
if
what the
you,
funding is for the ESA specifically? Because the ESA is more flexible, right, on what you can use it for.
yes,
So if you're homeschooling right now, it can follow you to your homeschool. The disabilities grant the same, right?
yes.
But one of them you can use for supplies or something. And
The ESA you can use for more supplies and more tutoring. It's a little bit more lax on what you can spend it for because it's geared more towards homeschoolers.
but there is accountability in that you're getting reimbursed, right, through receipts, I think. So you're
Yes,
proving
the
that.
ESA, you actually get it's like an education, like virtual card in an account. And so they're not just like giving you all this money and saying,
Mhm.
here, like go buy these things. It's basically Like if you had a prepaid debit card and you had to account for everything that you spend that money on, there is accountability, and tutoring and stuff like that has to be through approved providers. And you're still accountable for your state tests every year, just like if you were, at a regular private school or a homeschool. So really the only difference is that they're just allowing these families to do what's best for their children, that they may not necessarily be able to access, in their public district school. But I know the last report that's available, because this past year isn't available just yet, it was the 2018 to 19 school year. There was a total of 277 recipients just for the ESA, and they spent a total of $2,422,000 just on that program, which, I mean, really isn't that much if you consider how many people applied for the program.
This is crazy. I would have liked to see the ESAs expanded right after COVID. I wish it was on every legislator's mind, or the Opportunity Scholarship to just be a sum in the amount of $6,000 to $1,000 or any, I don't care what they called it, but for all those families that are thinking about leaving government-run schools after this huge gap in education, just to provide them with some sort of small amount of funding for them to adapt, like, because they might be happy in their home environments right now and say, hey, I never knew I could do this. Or, hey, look, he's learning how to read, or she's learning how to read. She could enunciate better now that she's working one-on-one with someone,
Exactly.
Kindergarten was a long time ago for me and my daughter. She's 13. You saw her at the beginning of this broadcast. So, but I do remember those exciting moments when your child does suddenly have the ability to grasp words and read through a story and then comprehend a story,
And for mine, that was at an accelerated rate. He was, at 4 years old, memorizing the planets and the moons of all the planets and, doing multiplication. And when you have a student that doesn't quite fit into a box, or a standard, it's a little frustrating as a parent. 'Cause it's, what do you do? What are your options?
Yeah. And so when it comes back to homeschooling, or if you're a newbie thinking about homeschooling, I just want to mention briefly, when I was looking through old education bills for this session, I remember the spring session, there was one that was going to credit homeschoolers like 50% of their educational costs. And because we buy curriculum, like I'm surrounded by books, you can't like 75% of this room that I'm standing in has books and junk everywhere. And while I'm thrifty and I can shop for used goods and barter, like those are some tools that anyone looking for extra resources can do, of course. But if I had bought them all at full price, it would have been nice to be reimbursed. Even as a teacher, like a public school teacher, I think can get up to $200 reimbursed back to him or her. And we don't have that in the homeschool community. So I'm a homeschool mom, surrounded by books and used materials, but my money, my tax dollars, or my husband's tax dollars, some stay-at-home mom, accommodating my child's educational needs, and pulled her out of the government-run school, just because I thought she was a high flyer and she couldn't fly any higher back then. Now I know I have a little troublemaker, and I got to stay on her to keep her at that, flying level. But as far as assessing all these potential like roadblocks, we have not ever gone down that path. So it is interesting to hear your story and, hear that Costco visualization where sitting in I keep saying it, but that is a really important visual. Because even in adult life, sometimes I feel like that. I'm like, whoa, that LED light's killing me, that overstimulation, or with audio, right? Like,
yes, for him, it's like imagining, like I said before, being in Costco or IKEA and just sitting down in the middle of the aisle and trying to do, a math worksheet or trying to read a book. Imagine, all the bright lights and the people talking around you and the cart squeaking beside you. And there's flowers over here that smell really strongly and pretty. And that's what it's like for children, like my son with autism. Some, are not as affected as others, but for him, he can't be in a regular classroom that has 20 kids, because that's just 20 distractions, 20 people clicking their pens, or,
Mhm.
making a weird sound, or, the lights started flickering. And that's the thing with, private specialty schools like the one we found, is that they even made adjustments to like their lighting. They have special lighting that's, for, people who have visual sensitivities. They don't buzz, they don't flicker, like they're specifically for those children. And it's all these little things that they do to make them feel comfortable enough so they can access that curriculum. And there's only so much that you can do even at home for that, unless again, you're spending a lot of money for all of,
Mhm.
these different special curriculums and items to accommodate that. I mean, I can't tell you, I still have an entire guest bedroom full of textbooks and, supplies and laminators and, everything you
Mhm.
think you need for homeschooling.
Mhm. Yep, I'm there. I know you definitely accumulate lots of stuff. Let me try not to look around this room I'm in.
Well, I was lucky enough that there was, well, unlucky for them, a private school that was shutting down or relocating in Charlotte a few years back. And they had posted in one of the homeschooling groups that you can come and get all this free curriculum. So as soon as I saw that post, I was there first thing that morning with my husband's truck, and I loaded up the whole back of the truck with anything and everything, from textbooks to posters to maps that I thought that he might need from, and he was only first grade at that time, to high school. I mean, granted, I won't use half of it, but at least I have it and it was free.
Gotcha. Yeah, freebies are nice. So this upcoming school year, what's that going to look like for you and your son, your family in general? Like,
Well,
we're under
right now it's
COVID.
kind of,
Are you
sorry.
I guess you have to work to pay for that private tuition.
Yes.
Which can you mention the price or a ballpark price?
It's almost $23,000 a
Okay.
year. And
Okay.
that's the average for autism or private special needs schools in North Carolina. There's actually a few that are a little bit more and just a little bit under, but that's the average.
But it sounds like they're well worth it. So going forward, are there going to be restrictions for you with COVID-19? Are you going to be able to work enough to sustain, or are you really relying on those scholarship
We
programs, those K
always
through 12
have to
grants?
rely on these scholarships. We are, a middle income family. We make enough to pay our bills, and get by. But when your tuition is 1/3 of your income, it really affects, what you're able to do. So we drive used cars, or cars that, have been paid for umpteen years, and we don't go out and go to restaurants. I mean, you make these sacrifices to be able to afford it. And, schools like that, they do offer some scholarships sometimes, but because, they're so new, they rely on donors, to fund these scholarships. So it's not guaranteed every year. And COVID-19 specifically this year has affected who's been donating to our school. So as of right now, they're not really available to give out a lot in scholarships this year, because they just couldn't get out and fundraise,
Sure.
for our kids, and that affects everybody.
Yeah, that stinks. So I don't want private schools to do worse, of course. If people are happy there, I would expect for private schools to take on more students. But if the parents, the families are losing income, that's not going to be possible unless they maybe consider adapting like the government schools are doing. And maybe so the government run schools, I read an article yesterday saying in North Carolina, they were going to do an A-B schedule with let's see, what I'm trying to think. So basically two shifts, or no, half the students were going to go in on day A, the other half were going to
Right.
go in on day B. So cutting the school populations in half. I cannot imagine those logistics, like how you can re-engineer all of
I
that.
don't know how parents are going to do it, especially if you have more than one child at different schools.
Working parents are not going to be able to do that.
Trying to find childcare that can accommodate. I fear that, kids will be left at home alone, because there's no one there to watch them. And if they have a job still, they have to go back to work right now. I mean, there's just no other options for parents.
But private, the way a private school could adapt is by what? Taking on more virtual learning. However, for your type of student, that's not going to necessarily work out well for you, right?
No,
Because you'd
honestly, if
still
they
be
if
stuck in
they
your home.
presented that to us, we would have to rethink going in the fall, because while my son is better adapted to, online schooling because of his history in homeschooling, some of our other kids just they can't do it, because you need that one-on-one person instruction. You need, that in-person hands-on instruction that they get. They need, they're manipulatives. They need to be able to
Mhm.
physically work the problem. Um, and they need to be in a routine as well. That's the biggest thing for children like my son on the autism spectrum, is that routine is very important to them, and they need that structure, and they need things to be the same. And if
Mhm.
especially right now during COVID-19, it's been really hard on some of our kids, because there's just so much unknown that they don't know what's going on. It's different from day to day. So honestly, I don't know how parents like myself will handle that in the fall if it's moved to online.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's not going to work out. So the alternative for you
Would
would
be
be,
homeschooling. We would definitely go back to
and your money,
homeschooling.
your tax dollars following you to your homeschool. So you could maybe accommodate your child on your own with your own, your quote unquote tax investments,
Right.
right? And I just want to remind everybody, investments are not forced; they're voluntary. So I don't consider tax or education funding to be an investment.
Right. And
While
that's
it is providing funding, investments, I get a return on those, and that's not always the case with a one size fits all option.
And
So
that's the big push for education savings accounts, which is one of the reasons I believe that program specifically should be increased and opened up to everyone in North Carolina right now. Because as of right now, you can only qualify if you have an IEP stating that you have a qualifying disability in the 13 different areas. But I think that it should be opened up to every student to be able to, take those education dollars that your parents are paying for and use it in whichever way works best for your education. Because,
yeah.
as I found out the hard way, no student learns the same. And they, sometimes you have to go a different path. But the way that the system is set up is that your money only stays on the one path. It doesn't follow you where you go.
Hmm. Yeah, I've heard from one mom who said she had to convert her child's college savings into the K through 12 tuition, and that didn't last that long. Whereas it may have lasted longer in a public college or something like that. It didn't. So it was 50,000 a year for tuition for a K through 12 specialty school that had the curriculum that you're mentioning, the Orton Gillingham
Mm-hmm.
OG, right, for short. And I'm ignorant on this subject because I don't hear a lot from parents like you. So I think that is why we're shining a light on it today, because you were willing to talk about it and say, look, I have this child who does not, he's definitely not fitting the mold. Here are the ways we can solve this problem, fix his education by what, A or B. And that's pretty much what it looks like to you, unless you could figure out another option. I don't know if micro schools could potentially work. But I don't know if they have the sensory uh, controlled measures that that specialty school will have. But I know
Right.
they do exist in the Charlotte area, if that's where you are, or Charlotte Mecklenburg. And I think those are supposed to be free schools. I want to say I know they are.
They normally have like curriculum fees or like technology fees, just to
Okay.
kind of cover their materials, basically material fee.
Okay.
And they are an option, and that's something that we would definitely look into. If we have to go back to homeschooling. The problem with some of those and homeschool co-ops that we looked into when we were homeschooling is that they're still really not set up for children on the spectrum. If your child becomes a disruption, or he, has a sensory overload meltdown, their rules for that is that, well, he just can't be here. He just needs to
Okay.
leave.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
you still kind of come back to, well, we checked this box and this box and this box, but we still have this one over here, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where these specialty schools really come into in North Carolina. And there's a lot like them that aren't, even specifically for children on the spectrum, they have, learning different schools that are for, children with ADHD or dyslexia, and they're all private, which, then again, you still can't take your money with you unless you can, champion the district to pay for out of district placement, which if any, parent that's been through it knows that costs thousands of dollars to hire your lawyer to fight the system.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, I think it's only like 10%, don't quote me on that, of cases actually get your out of district placement.
Yeah. And then you're not allowed to talk about it.
Yes. A lot of them do have to sign NDAs after.
So the non-disclosure agreement for the viewers, if you're watching or listening, I do appreciate you. Pam, if you're still there, hi. She said hi from Arkansas. I guess she's traveling. And I don't know if you're allowed to travel, Pam, if you're still on there watching, because she's a North Carolina resident. I wasn't paying attention to the governor's recommendation yesterday because I think we were arguing about school choice yesterday at the same time. So what do you think, Rebecca, going forward? What would you like you have talked to your legislators, because we connected
emails and tried to call.
Yeah, that was my recommendation to you. Have you reached out to your legislators? And I think your answer was yes. Where'd you get with them?
The only response that I received to date is a generated "thank you for your concern" response, and we will look into this issue for you.
Was that last year, or was this last week?
It was last year and this year. I continue to spam them with my emails in hopes that, somebody will listen, which is, why I'm thankful that you gave me this platform today, that, maybe somebody like me will hear it and, join the fight for our kids.
Yeah. So I'm just a mom, just like you. I don't have a special needs child or a learning difference child or anything like that. I have a stubborn child. But other than that, we pulled out of the school system that we thought did not work for us. So I'm a mom just like you in many aspects. And
I just want to clarify that, we were never anti-public school. We're still not anti-public school. I support the system. I have many friends that are teachers and they're wonderful. It just doesn't fit for us.
Sure.
And that I think that is the same way for a lot of families right now. I mean, especially in the autism community where, you have 1 in 4 children with a learning difference or a neurological difference. And they need to recognize that these numbers not necessarily are increasing, but we're becoming more aware of them. And they should be able to, take their education dollars to these schools that are built specifically for them. I mean, it should be about what works best for our children, not what works best for the system. Yeah.
And so if you watch Corey DeAngelis's tweets, you could say over and over again, he's saying fund the students, not the system,
exactly.
Which is, exactly what parents need to hear, exactly what the politicians need to hear as well. And I don't know if they're listening. I know there are other advocacy groups in the state of North Carolina, and I'm not privy to know what they're doing and what they're not doing. I know that there's just a lot of work to be done on school choice issues in the state of North Carolina. And I don't think that's going to require politicians to lobby for parents. I think parents are going to have to lobby for their own children to get the results that they want. And whether that is going down there and going down to the legislators and meeting with them in person, which you can't do right now because of COVID restrictions, right? I mean, I guess you go to the reopen rallies if they're still going on. I don't know. But another idea would be to, if you found a group of parents just like you in the same situation, a more similar situation than me versus you, that was looking for a solution for education, and you could consider creating your own school. I know it would be a huge undertaking, of course, but the fact that you have limited options in the state to begin with, that's just a red flag to me. And I think there's one charter school that might be a specialty school at this point that, if they don't have a waiting list, could benefit some children with learning differences. But, chances are they're probably going to have a waiting list at this point. So I just wanted to mention really quick, also the lottery systems with
the disability grant and the education savings account as well they're set up in a priority lottery system. First priority being those who, have already received one.
Yeah.
Second priority, active military. And even so then the third tier would be for anyone not currently in a public school system. So that's, your private schoolers, your homeschoolers. So in my situation, we were already at a disadvantage because we were homeschooling. And I just wanted to point that out. If, we have any of our legislators listening or, anyone that may also be in the same situation, is that really the wording needs to be changed to be inclusive for everyone, not just for, those who are in public school who may need an option, because it really excludes those of us who have been struggling just trying to find a place. And I really believe that they should increase the education savings account program specifically, and that would be a great solution to increase the program, to change the eligibility requirements to any eligible North Carolina students, so that not just children like myself, but just anyone looking to have that other option can access that.
Yeah, and I think that Senate Bill 711, which was introduced a couple weeks ago, I think that expanded eligibility options to, was it anybody? Do you remember?
It expanded the Opportunity Scholarship
That's right,
eligibility to any North Carolina student.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. So you couldn't get that one because
no, we were just over the limit for that one, which a lot of families, even as a single income family, we're not rich, we're middle income, just are barely over the limit. And there's no exceptions for that. There's no, disability clause in that one, such as, with the disability grant or the ESA, you can't qualify with your IEP. It's strictly income based. And while it's a great program, it is unfortunate because they have so much more funding than the other two programs. I mean, Governor Cooper himself boasted a $16.4 million surplus last year. But a lot of people can't access that because they're above the income limit, even though they may not be, well off enough to pay for an expensive private school. You kind of get stuck in limbo.
So if the OSP, the Opportunity Scholarship Program, was ideal, so you said if the ESA was going to be ideal for my family, I would like for them to change a couple of words, make everyone eligible, right? Increase the funding so more people can actually access that grant. What do you think about the OSP, the Opportunity Scholarship? Would you so I understand that one person could qualify for all of these K through 12 grants if they jump through all the hoops, meet all those requirements. However, finding people who have actually been eligible, you said there's how many, that there were only 277 or something for the ESA?
There was only 277 total for the 18 through 2019 year.
And then we have legislators on top of that. I think I found Representative Cynthia Ball, so it's a North Carolina legislator, last night, who said in some of her old tweets, said that she would like to eliminate, I believe, the ESA. And I think the ESA currently only goes to disabled students. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, you still have to have your qualifying IEP, which you can only get through your district school, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think the district school should have anything to do with people who have left the district school. So in House Bill 1129, going through the LEA, the local education agency or whatever that stands for, it means going through your local school district. Yes. I don't think they should have anything because they don't like homeschoolers. They don't like people who are using alternate means of education. And you may have had
I mentioned this real quick in my petition that I created last year for Governor Cooper to change these requirements. So right now, to re-qualify for the disability grant or the ESA, so if you already have it and you're looking to renew it for the next year, you don't have to have a valid IEP any longer. Once you already have it, you only have to have a letter from a psychologist stating that you still have a qualifying disability, which I think is a lot more reasonable. So even if they just change that requirement for the ESA to just, have a letter from your doctor stating that you have a need for this program, I think would be a good, middle ground or an accommodation.
Sure, but then all those people that you had your IEP meetings with no longer have a job, right?
Exactly. Who will tell me to keep my child at home then?
Well, those people, I think it's outrageous that there's like 10 or 12 people in an IEP meeting anyway. So I
I
do
was
have,
not prepared. I was not prepared at all to face six strangers telling me about my child that I had been homeschooling. You know, I completely, it's just as baffling that parents have to do this alone. And if you want an advocate, then you have to pay thousands of dollars for it, even though the system has an unlimited budget for lawyers and for advocates on their side.
yeah, it's not good. So, but anyway, you shouldn't have to do business with groups who are not saying everyone in the government run school is part of this group, but teachers union groups in government schools are a big, loud force. And so when they see groups leaving the government run schools, they see, in a lot of cases, children are like dollar signs. And not to crack on them or insult them at all, but yeah, if your child is not going to the government run school, that's money that they're not getting for that school year. So if they can bring your child back somehow, for some reason they didn't want your child, they said, you do what you can do, they would still get local dollars whether you stayed at home or went to the private school. So your local tax supplement still goes to that government run school. So they do still benefit whether you leave for moving out of the zip code or going to a private school or homeschooling. They still benefit in one way or another. But anyway, so these groups, these teachers union groups, typically are saying these repeated buzzwords, which you heard me say yesterday, that private schools are unaccountable. So they're very much against the vouchers or these opportunity scholarship programs. And they just have these same talking points, that they're unaccountable, that they undermine government run schools or undermine public school funding. Which I just talked about, that if the child leaves by either moving out of the district, moving out of the state, that's still dollars leaving that school building. Someone else is going to move into that house and replace you eventually. And
there are always going to be students, that benefit from the public education system. There are always going to be students that, that do fine in a regular classroom, that are neurotypical, that, can thrive in those sort of settings. But it's not a one size fit all. All of our children are not the same.
That's right. And every private school is not going to work out for my child. And I don't think it's just an elite class of folks that are seeking a private education. I think it's people who are looking for solutions. They might say, oh, look, I'm not going to expose my child to that bully anymore. They're not going to do anything about the bully, so I'll do something myself, remove my child from the situation and seek out another option. But the problem is, in the state of North Carolina, we promote things like the DMV, but we don't promote school choice. So the government advertises the DMV, but the government does not advertise these taxpayer savings programs. So it might not apply to your student, but it will apply to my student. So if I can educate her at a private school and I get that opportunity scholarship and it's $4,200, she's going to come in at a lower cost than if she was in the government run school for 12, 13 years. Mm-hmm. So with that average being $9,700 right now. So if you add up $9,700 times 13 years, that's a lot more than $4,200 times 13 years. And yes, I still have to pick up it would be hard for me to find a tuition that's $4,200 with that opportunity scholarship, but it doesn't matter. That's a huge chunk of money. And me paying that additional, a lot of cases, I think the average is $6,500. Right. Which you can break that up into payments, 12 payments at a lot of schools. You can work off some of that tuition. You can look for investors at that school to help you knock off some of that tuition, like you were saying. And you have to just know that these tools exist. If you're in a building that is not a brick and mortar school building, that's not benefiting your child. So there are options. I wish the state talked about all the various options a little bit more. So it's like we have to volunteer our time to do it.
Right. Well, the thing is, they promote, these programs. So like North Carolina has 3 school choice programs. We are pro school choice, but then when you start to look at the data of these programs and how much is actually, awarded to students, and annually, continually get letters from, the program saying, sorry, we didn't have enough money for everybody that applied. You get a little salty about it, because every private school, almost every private school in North Carolina, they advertise these programs in the tuition section of their websites. North Carolina has these programs, apply. This is the help. And a lot of, nonprofit programs that you used to be able to find in North Carolina closed down when they created these programs, because they're like, well, North Carolina's handling it. They're taking care of it. And so there are no other options. You either qualify for these or you don't. And I think that, North Carolinians really need to look at these students that are being let down, and see what they can do to help.
So what about the disabilities grant? Why that one was a funding issue for you too?
That one, we were denied that one as well, because they said there were not enough applicants for the available funding. So if you look at the data just this past year, because it's the only data that's available right now, they had 2,430 new students apply just for the disability grant alone. Out of those, there were only 173 students that received and accepted that award. So if you look at the numbers, I mean, that's just less than 1% of new applicants actually are awarded a disability grant. I mean, that's just, you have better odds of, winning the lottery.
Well, I've heard failure stories where, like, hey, I'm a mom. I'm going to pull my kid out of the government-run elementary school up the street. I'm going to continue going back to the school to do those IEP meetings, and then suddenly I'm going to say, forget it, because you're wasting my time. My funding is not following me to my homeschool. So I have heard those disappointing stories like that. You still have to connect with the local district that you're trying to escape, right? Because they let down your family in one way or another, whether, you just hated being there altogether, whether you're bullied, whether your child is not staying on grade level, or they're saying, you need to be held back 2 years. I've heard all of these things. But then, that final nail in the coffin is the parents like throwing their hands up saying, I can't deal with all this red tape. Why do I have to keep going back there? We left there. Why do I have to keep doing these meetings? Exactly. And I still have nobody helping me with the finances. So it is unfortunate. So so at a glance, I would assume that the same amount of people who are qualifying for the OSP were getting the ESAs and the disability grants. But I guess I didn't pay close enough attention to it. So those are extremely low numbers that are qualifying for it. So are you saying both were rejected due to lack of funding?
Yes, both programs. And the thing is, like, I know even with the lottery system, the way I explained, first priority being to those who had already received. Second priority, I know people who are active military in this state, because we're, a prior military family as well, who have applied for these. So they would be considered second tier. And they've been denied for these programs as well, which, someone like me that's third tier looks at that and they're like, well, we tried. Like,
this is crazy.
It's just I wish that our leaders would look at these numbers. That's public information. Anyone, if I can pull it up, being a lonely stay-at-home mom, I know that they have this information available to them. They would see that North Carolinian families like myself want these programs, or else they wouldn't be applying for them. They wouldn't jump through all the hoops to go to the public school and get the IEP just so they can apply for these programs. And so, I mean, even for me, if I want to keep trying to apply for these, IEPs are only good for 3 years. So coming up next year, I'm going to have to go back to our district school and have my son reevaluated. And, the way that they did it this last time, I don't know if they're going to grant him an IEP, which means that we may not even qualify for these programs next year to apply.
And tell everybody what an IEP is, because some folks might not know what that is. We should have started out with that. Whoops.
Sorry. So an IEP is what's called an individualized education program or plan. It is a legal binding contract between you and the school. You are considered part of his team or their team, that states what their disability or their disadvantage is and the accommodations that the school has to make for that child. So once it is in writing, they have to qualify through 13 different categories that's laid out in IDEA legislation, which is basically the Education Disabilities Act. It's a federal act that tells our government, our local schools, what they have to give these children. And when you sign that contract, you have to abide by it. I'm not going to go into how often it's actually enforced.
Sure.
I know in the state of North Carolina alone, last year, there were around 100 civil rights complaints, but I'm not going to get into that.
Wow.
So when you have an IEP, your teacher is essentially supposed to make these accommodations for you. So that can be anything from individualized curriculum to, like my son having to use a laptop to type everything because he can't handwrite. Or they need a personal aide to sit next to them to keep them on track. That's what your IEP is. It basically just states that we have evaluated your student and they qualify under one of these categories as having a disability needing extra accommodations.
But so if they don't cooperate with you and you go back for your IEP, which they might not cooperate if they ever see you in this video, that would be bad. That'd be very bad. There's not an alternative for you. The psychologist could not sign off on it at this point.
Based on the current rules and regulations laid out for these programs, in order to initially qualify, you have to have that IEP stating that they have a qualifying disability. And like I said before, if you had already received one and you just needed to reapply for the grant program, you don't have to have that IEP. You could never get an IEP again for the rest of their educational, career. You only need that psychologist letter or your doctor letter stating that they still qualify. And I think that that's really discriminatory because it forces you to go back to your public district to get, reevaluated, even though if you're someone like me, we went to a private psychologist and paid out of pocket, to the tune of $2,600 for this private evaluation.
Oh my gosh.
How is that not
for the grants?
Yes. So how just to qualify for the grant? So how is that not enough to qualify? So a lot of this wording just really isn't set up for real families. It's set up to make you keep going back to your district school and to get fed up and just not apply. It's really not set up to actually help families.
Yeah, it sounds like the deck is really stacked against families like yours. And my family doesn't benefit from whatsoever by leaving the government school either. And those people who might watch this later, attack me by saying government run school. It is a government run school. They're government employees. It's a government building. It's paid by tax dollars. That's exactly what it is. And overseen by government officials and the school board. So I just let's go ahead and wrap this up. You gave a ton of great information, Rebecca, and we can always do something like this again. Sure. I did consider bringing in a legislator, if possible. I would love to. I think this is pretty much an intimate setting, and I think a legislator could volley some comments back and forth, and maybe the public could benefit from hearing from a legislator. But first and foremost, parents are a priority for me. So I didn't want to bring a politician in when I didn't know where you stood. If you had just been failed all around, and it sounds like that is the case, and we need to do better. And one way we can do better is by motivating other parents to help parents like you. And we don't necessarily need a giant organization. I have just this little organization because I don't know, it just fell in my lap one day. Someone started saying I was segregating my child from other children by choosing a charter school. And that didn't go down too well with me. So that's kind of like what got me started, I think. But then I was also one who had left the first school and then tried that charter school. So shame on me twice. And then now we're homeschoolers. So shame on me 3 times. So I should be well hated in the teacher union community. But
all
anyway,
the years being a good parent, we do what we have to do for our kids.
Right. I do firmly believe that a parent does have the sole authority to direct a child's education. So if a parent is okay with the local school,
then that's great. I'm glad that it works for them.
But you should also have that option to choose your school, your great school too. And for you, that means your specialty school. For me right now, it means my homeschool. I would be, in Thales like that if it was free.
Mhm.
But with none of my tax dollars following me to anywhere, I'm going to have to save and potentially do a NC 529. So I was going to mention that to you too before you went. So just like we have a 529 savings plan on the federal level, we now have it in the state. So I think that is as fresh as 2 years ago, but I don't think a lot of people know about it. So that is one tool where you could do you have a health savings account? It's similar to that. You just take money right out of your paycheck and bank that savings. But if you're solely relying on scholarships, there's nothing for you to bank. Chances are some of the viewers are not going to have money to bank. It might be even less viewers have money to bank under COVID-19 situation. So it's really going to be scary to see what happens with the private school community, I think, this fall.
Even I did doing my research, for the article that I did the video for School Choice TV. The article stated that, if only 20% of our private school population, had to go back to our district schools in the fall due to, parents losing their income, they're still not working. Our state is still sort of shut down for like another 5 weeks now until we move to the next phase. 20% increase, I think they said, was a $15 billion strain on the public school system. And so really, like, it benefits not just us as private schoolers or homeschoolers, but it benefits our district schools as well, to save these private schools and, these vouchers that, help send our kids to these schools, because our system just isn't set up to have that much of an influx of people.
Sure. Yeah, well, you need the money to go to those private schools, though.
Exactly.
The money and the scholarships. So maybe the spring of 2021, we can plan on lobbying the legislators, because this session, all the bills that were going to be introduced, I think, have been introduced, and that window has closed, I believe. But maybe we can follow up on that and then maybe get motivated to do something in the spring, something strategic to address the legislators. And I know that's too long to wait because school's going to be in August. So what good is spring going to do? And maybe we'll get some input from viewers about this and who are going through the same thing and say, hey, yeah, I want to do something. And it will take more than just sending an email to your legislators. That's not going to do it. I mean, they get thousands and thousands of emails. And we emailed them last week. Did you get a response?
I did not get a response. So,
and I've emailed a lot of legislators and Congress people lately. And sometimes you get a call back. So I would say calling is probably better. Being in person is probably the best. But you still want a group of folks to go with you down there and have a meeting. Maybe bring cookies or something. But anyway, so let's go ahead and wrap up. Before we go, I do want to mention all the bills that we were talking about. I don't know if we got to House Bill 1126, but we did talk about House Bill 1129, which is maybe if Corey DeAngelis catches wind of this, he could, chop it all up with his ninja swords, because the phrasing in that one was stopping funding going to homeschoolers, and it was dealing with the Opportunity Scholarship. And it also said abolish the Opportunity Scholarship program. And then didn't you say it makes people, the current recipients had to
yes. So with the 1129, not only does it stop future funding for the Opportunity Scholarship, that's their phrase right now. Well, those who already have it aren't going to lose it. Well, that's not necessarily the case. So what the wording does is those who are already a recipient, they will now have to front their tuition to those schools and then be reimbursed. Yeah, and that's going to be a real problem, especially right now with people losing their income. The average income for families on the Opportunity Scholarship is around $16,000. Do you think someone who makes $16,000 a year can afford to front, $4,200 for
No.
tuition and then wait for the, the program to pay them back. It's just not possible. And they
Right.
know that. That's why they put that in there. Their whole goal is to not only get rid of future applicants and recipients, but they want to kind of, force people out of the program so that they can close it down even faster. It's just, they just
Sure.
want it to implode on itself.
Yeah, the anti-school choice mob needs to change directions. I would love to see them pivot, because it seems like it's one party that is opposing all this stuff. I haven't found someone from a different party yet, and I've captioned all their parties in all of my tweets. So my Twitter handle is what is it? At NC the number 4 school choice. So if you go there and search my tweets where I'm calling out the legislators, they all have one letter beside their name. There's not D's, L's, R's. It happens to be all D's. So, and when we find out that some of those Democrat legislators have actually used private schools themselves
and sent their children to private schools as well.
What are we supposed to think about that? So hopefully they'll end up on the school choice hypocrite map that is, I think, being maintained by Education Freedom Institute. So we just need to find better news sources. And just as a whole in North Carolina, the left seems to be talking an awful lot about opposing school choice when the issue comes up in November and these candidates are on the ballot. People really need to vote by issue, not by party. Like, you don't have to fill in the same letter bubble all the way down the front and the back of the ballot. Whoops, I'm losing my voice a little bit. And I do hear, do we mention all the bills? So Senate Bill 711, expand school choice. That is a good one. Hopefully that passes. House Bill 1129 and then House Bill 1126. And then I also printed out a couple of pages of July 2015 court case, which was Hart versus the state of North Carolina, I think. And so I just want to remind some of the lawmakers, if they happen to watch this, the Opportunity Scholarship is legal and was held by the NC Supreme Court, that it was constitutional. Even though a lot of them don't want it to be constitutional, it was ruled that way, and for good reason. So I would recommend some of those legislators go back and read that opinion of the court and figure out why it is constitutional. So there's a ton of information in this broadcast. But if you're motivated like Rebecca and I, you'll go back and start digging and maybe join us. And Rebecca, I appreciate you doing the digging on a couple of legislators that you've been working on lately. You're working your way up.
I'm getting there.
And I think I'm working my way down on 1129. And we'll see if we can figure out if they're school choice hypocrites. And that's just one small way you can help out, right?
Yeah.
Well, keep up the great work, and thank you for sharing. Was there any last thoughts that you wanted to pass along before we close? We've passed an hour.
The biggest thing that we want people to know is that we're not anti-public school, that we're pro-student, and that's my big push right now. We're pro-student. We want the funds to follow the children, wherever works best for them. And if you have a story like mine, please, tweet at us or post under this video and share your story, because we need more people telling their stories like myself. And again, thanks for having me. I appreciate being able to come on and share my own story.
No problem. Glad to have you on. And I want to tell everybody I'm not against teachers, but I am against teacher unions because they oppose school choice. So I am very much for school choice, giving parents like Rebecca more options, and instead of pointing her child back to the one option or being in the homeschool, you have the government school or you have the homeschool. The government school kind of rejected you. What was that quote? We can end with that quote. We don't know what to do with him.
They said, we don't know what to do with him. You should just keep homeschooling. So
they're basically telling you have one option, homeschool, and then you're trying to find those resources and it's just not working out. So I'm going to stand with the parent. I'm not going to stand with the special interest groups, the teachers union. Although I do love teachers, they're great public servants. And so if you are a good teacher out there watching, keep up the great work. And if you want to get involved, please reach out to Rebecca or myself. And you want to tell your story, reach out immediately to me. And thank you everybody for watching. Please share this with your friends. That would be a great compliment to us. Bye, Rebecca. Bye, everybody.
Bye.